Hello and welcome to 52 Weeks. This week we're still in Chapter 4, and we're actually in Section 4, which is focused on streetscapes. I've broken all these things down into 6 segments because it's very much easier to digest in pieces because there's so much that's here that needs to be discussed. So in this first part, we're looking at streetscapes. So this goes back to an earlier discussion about the public realm. And here's a quote from the comp plan. Great cities are defined by their streetscapes. Harrisburg's early designers envisioned a great city and provided the formal structure for us to maintain and embellish. The streetscapes are something that we should continue to understand. The one thing to transition into is this thinking from 1950s and on about transportation planning and actually getting into understanding that streets are for people and were for people. They were a way of getting around. And so if we look at that and scale them to people, to bikes, multimodal transit, this connects back to the mobility chapter. We can actually develop some amazing streetscapes and spaces for us to inhabit. So again, this topic of streetscapes talks about the public realm. Again, there's Warren Manning's quote, Harrisburg is again fortunate in having several streets sufficiently broad to be given the character of parkway, with turf, planting spaces, and uniform rows of trees. Again, we can really green up the city and link our places together, our neighborhoods together. And Warren Manning also said, it might be mentioned here that the successful planting of trees along all city streets, as well as along the park approaches, can best be done by park or other commission rather than individual property owners. So early on in the 1900s, they were thinking about a master planning way of working with the trees and parks and a whole system. This goes back to the green space plan and a system of tying all our green spaces together. Goal 4.12, Designs for Signature Streets at All Scales. The primary purpose of unique streetscapes is placemaking. They enhance the district character of parts of the city. And this is what was out of the comp plan and understanding some of the river streets that here. There's a diagram looking at Division, Maclay, State, and Market and their relationships to the river, and they tie back into the hill, the bluff, and then the hill. For example, Front Street needs to continue to evolve towards a low-speed parkway to improve the experience of Riverfront Park. I've included some images that I collected from Front Street and the ability to try to walk across. And this goes the whole way down into Steelton as well, where connections with the Greenbelt occurs. So you can see from these images, it's obvious that there's a transportation plan that's there to try and get people in and out of the city. That's a remnant of the last century. And we're really trying to change that and rethink that. To me, this is a design issue. If you want to try to fix this, it is designing roads in a way that slow traffic down, and you design in a way for the pedestrian, for the place and the experience. That's why streetscapes in the public realm are very important. If we don't consider these things, we're just going to continue to be mad and upset when we try to cross, and we have tragedies that people get hit on Front Street, or they get hit coming across Market or State Street, these wider streets. This can be fixed. It's a mindset of that there are people that live in the city and they enjoy the city. Visitors that come by and are using the city have to understand that there's people that live here 24/7, and we really appreciate the spaces that we inhabit. It's not to say that we don't want visitors. We encourage visitors. That's what makes commerce happen. But the issue is, how do we think about changing and transitioning the speed of cars from coming off of 81 and particularly coming down Front Street above 81 and down into the city of Harrisburg, and the same with Steelton and these longer stretches of road. This is all going to be interesting to see when AI and automated vehicles actually take the roads, and how that begins to change. That our focus on transit could be much different. Honestly, this is what we as residents, if we're really careful about placemaking, we can make it that it's wonderful for everybody to inhabit, and that they're safe places and great green spaces that we hang out in. So 4.12 is designed for signature streets. This is an example of the River District, can also be applied to Hill. These are understanding the one-way and two-way streets. This diagram is looking at what happens when 2nd and Front Street change to two-way traffic, and where do people move through. This is a good thing to analyze and look at from a space syntax that looks at streets and street network, running Harrisburg's roadways through this and understanding that. It's also important to understand that the state owns Front Street and the city owns 2nd, and there's these two conflicting issues that we have to deal with. So the interesting thing is which one takes precedent. Planning and street hierarchy should be done with residents to strengthen uniqueness in neighborhoods. And again, the city has done a good job because they went and took the two-way conversion of 2nd Street into a public discussion. However, that discussion needs to be even broadened so that more residents are involved, that there's more diversity in the process, that it's not in one single building. This happens in multiple locations to talk about this. Why can't these meetings happen in churches all around, or the neighborhood center, the public spaces that we have, or schools? These meetings should be very open, transparent, and allow for everybody to come in. And they all should be, in my view, they all should be televised or broadcast through a Twitch channel or some sort of a YouTube channel, so that all residents get to know what's happening. This is one of the detriments in planning right now, is that the dissemination of information is very limited. And while people say we're going to try to get this information out to everybody, the people who show up have limits. They can't get there because of the hours. There's a very busy life. Ultimately, people have a certain bandwidth to even deal with some of this stuff. So I think the city needs to be really cognizant of how it changes its messaging to really draw into the bigger crowds and really get the word out. This is what I've been trying to talk about when I go to the Planning Commission meetings and talk about crowdsource planning, or at least a way that this feedback loop is shortened so that residents know what's happening. This can be done through city council. This can be done through the school boards that are there, the candidates that are disseminating information. We just need a better network and not rely on Nextdoor, which is its own thing. No bias in the sense that it can't be manipulated or pushed around through the funding of that mechanism. This is where the fourth estate is supposed to be happening. There are no good newspapers reporting this. So this is something to be thinking about, is how do we create a mechanism for planning